Hey everybody, Jedi Jon here again with another 5 good questions on data science. I'm here today with Jim Gabalski, Vice President of Logical Operations. Jim, you've had a pretty storied career, so I want to kind of run through some of your accomplishments here, places you've worked, and if you want to tell us a little bit about each one, that would be great.
Sure thing. Thanks, John. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Jim, you started at Kodak, big Rochester institution.
Yeah, spent 10 years there, started out as a programmer analyst, got into marketing, did a lot of forecasting work and descriptive analytics work, and then went into sales, and that's when I started my sales and marketing career selling printing systems for Kodak.
Next, it looks like you went to Logical Operations, but back in the heyday, so tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that was actually really great. So during that time, I was in sales operations, did a lot of work with data during that, then took over some responsibility for sales, and then actually ran the training center for the last 3 to 4 years of my experience at Logical Operations before moving on to my .com adventure.
Yes, I see that. Logicalsolutions.net. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so sure. That was actually pretty interesting. That was my first foray into really customer relationship marketing. So we did a lot of digital application design and build out, and I like to say that we actually had a mini Facebook before Facebook was real. And we did a lot of work for Jim Beam, Absolute Vodka, some of the big spirits brands, and then some really cool fashion brands, and then telecom as well. And all of it was built on data analytics for informed marketing.
Wow. So after that, it looks like Emerge Partners. Tell me a little bit about that.
So Emerge was one of my clients at Logical Solutions, and that was the CRM marketing agency. And so that's where I actually started working with even bigger brands like T-Mobile and AT&T and Microsoft, and really then accelerated some of the work that I was doing with some of the spirits brands as well. All data-driven marketing.
Okay. Next up, it looks like you went to Getinge.
Getinge, perfect. A lot of people don't say that correctly. So yes, I was the VP of marketing for the Americas, and everything, that was a med device company, and everything we did there was data-driven marketing based on customer intelligence.
Looks like next up is Go Emerge. Got a lot of G's in your history.
Sure, and that was actually the next iteration of Emerge Partners. So Emerge Partners became Go Emerge. So I kind of boomeranged back to Emerge Partners in the same type of a program where we were doing data-driven marketing. But this time we were working with more financial institutions, big credit card companies, banking, those types of companies. Sure.
And now you're back here at Logical Operations, so tell us a little bit about that.
Boomerang number 2, right? So keep coming back to where I was before, which maybe that's a good sign, maybe it's a bad sign, but the same thing, sales, marketing, and all data-driven marketing, and where I'm really now starting to get into the notion of data science and data analytics training.
Excellent. Jim, so if you're familiar, we do 5 questions on any topic. So topic today is data science. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you some questions.
Fantastic.
Great. So question number 1, you've had a pretty significant career, it sounds like, and you've done a lot of data-driven programs. Can you give me some examples of those programs and how they worked?
Sure. So let me start out with the spirits. That was a lot of fun, because at the time that I was doing that marketing, you could collect a lot of information. And so in the spirit space, what you really wanted to do was to gather information on who your consumers were, so that you could describe them and then market to them based on their demographic profiles. So what that basically means is who was consuming the product, how were they consuming it, and when were they consuming it. So then we could inform the marketing programs based on those descriptions to have smarter, more intelligent, more referenceable marketing. So the pictures would look correct and the tone would sound correct. And so we would be able to describe something like this. We'd be able to describe that the majority were men. They were young men. When they started to consume the product, they would consume it with either a Coke type product, a cola type product, or a lemon lime type mixer. And then they would move more towards a natural consumption state, and then they would move into other types of experiences with brown spirits, and those spirits would be things like scotch or small batch bourbon. So we could describe what the stages were. So that's what we did for Jim Beam, and we were able to actually help them form the marketing. The second one that I'll touch on, the high fashion brand that we all probably are familiar with, Gucci, and what we were trying to do is predict what somebody was likely to purchase based on what they purchased before. And what we learned was that a female who shops in a store and buys a handbag as their first purchase are most likely going to purchase another handbag. So we could market to them, here's the next handbag you should buy. But a man who bought a handbag, same handbag, female handbag, typically bought that online and typically bought that for a wife or a girlfriend or a friend. Their next most likely purchase, based on the data that we gathered, was either a pair of shoes or a wallet or a belt for themselves. So that's the second type of work that I did. So that was kind of the predictive work that I did for Gucci. The last one, and being from Rochester, I have to talk about Kodak a little bit, big photo giant. And when they got into digital cameras, they started to describe who their consumers were. So we were able to say that one consumer was the person who would show their photos at a party, right? Here's my phone, here's my photo book. Another one was that one that would take great care and put together a scrapbook. And then there's the third one that category, which we call them digital manipulators, digital controllers, who would want to edit their photos using Photoshop or something like that. What was really, really interesting about that is that you might have been a digital manipulator, I might have been a proactive sharer, but I still like to do things with my photographs a little bit, and you still like to share your photographs a little bit. So nobody really fit into one bucket perfectly. So we could use the analytics and data that we gathered to prescribe how we should talk to a consumer based on how intense they were in each category. So if you were an intense digital manipulator, I would really talk to you loudly about digital manipulation and a little bit about proactive sharing. Whereas if I'm a big proactive sharer, we would turn up the dial in terms of the intensity of that program or that type of messaging for a proactive sharer. So that was more prescribing how the marketing should work.
Jim, there's a lot in those examples.
Sure.
So let's unpack this a little bit. Question 2, can you tell us the different types of analytics? You obviously have a lot of experience with this. So can you tell us the different types of analytics and kind of give us
Sure.
brief descriptions of what's out there and what people might be doing?
Okay, sure. So there are three, and I'll keep it short. The first one is descriptive analytics. So when you think of descriptive analytics, think of describing what happened, right? What did somebody do? Somebody bought a handbag. Somebody bought a digital camera. So that's descriptive analytics. It does a really good job of describing what happened, right? And that's a big function inside of most big companies, is just tell me what happened so that I know what happened. Management wants to know. The second one is predictive analytics. So what is predictive analytics? I kind of mentioned the Gucci example. Based on what you did or what happened, what is likely to happen next? So this female bought a handbag. She bought it at a store. What's likely to happen next is she's likely to buy another handbag. So we should talk to her about buying another handbag. Whereas the man who bought the handbag online is most likely going to buy a pair of shoes, wallet, or belt for himself, so we should talk to him about that. So that's the predictive analytics. Prescriptive analytics describes what should happen, what you should do. Based on everything that you've done, you should do something. So prescriptive analytics is a little harder to describe, but if you think about it in the context of healthcare, you can say, based on this person, I describe this person, where they've been and what they've done and what has been tried, what's the best course of treatment for them based on all the other outcomes. So you use analytics to prescribe a course of action that neither predictive analytics or descriptive analytics would tell you to do.
So that's obviously a great overview. Let me just sum it up. There's descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive analytics.
Right.
Excellent. So obviously you seem pretty excited about this, which is why we have you on. I've got a question here about, what are the opportunities in this space? Kind of, is this something that's growing? Is it near? Is this something that's going to grow immediately now? Is this a far future technology? Where are we at when it comes to data science and growth opportunities?
So this is really interesting because you don't need to do deep dive analytics to really understand what's happening with this market. Data, as you've referenced, is the new oil, is what's driving the economy. And so that's just continuing to grow. In fact, I listened to you the other day where there's more bytes of data than grains of sand on the earth. And so that's really interesting, and that's just continuing to grow. So there's an explosion of data, and there's exploding ways to use the data. So that's one thing. This is just the trajectory for data and data science it's in its near infancy. There are 50% more openings currently than there are qualified analysts and scientists to fill those openings. And the number of jobs you quote, what's the number that you quote in terms of the number of jobs that are going to be created, new jobs, 11 million by 20 million by, what's the number?
It's 375 million new jobs in the next 10 years.
There you go. So that trajectory says that data science and data analytics are going to continue to just grow beyond what we've seen in the past. So this is real because data is the currency that most companies are operating with.
Jim, I have to say it feels good to have my personal opinions on the data science revolution validated by an industry expert.
Thank you.
So that's really great. I'm glad to hear that. Now, this is a question that came in that's pretty it's pretty descriptive here of like what we do at Logical Operations. So I'm going to throw this one at you here. What types of training does Logical Operations offer and recommend for someone who's interested in getting into either data analytics or data science?
So the first thing we do is we start with the job role, and we say, okay, what are the two roles that are the big roles? So let's put them into two buckets, an analyst and a scientist. So what do those job roles entail? So an analyst is typically going to be working with data sets from within their company or their organization. So an analyst working inside a hospital will gather patient data or discharge data or admission data, and they'll work with that to do a lot of description, right? So what types of tools do an analyst need? Those tool sets are typically something like Excel, Tableau, and Power BI. And that'll be sufficient. Those types of skills will be sufficient for any analyst who's already got who has already obtained good critical reasoning skills, good analytical skills from their degree program. And so they'll take those analytical skills and they'll apply them to the hard skills that they get from Excel, Power BI, or Tableau. A scientist, however, is going to work with either much bigger data sets or they're going to work with external data sets or both. And they'll need a different set of tools. So something like a Python or an R, and then they're going to have to work with those toolkits in very advanced ways, like data wrangling, data statistics, data visualization, and normalization. They'll have to work with those tools to really massage that data. And so the scientist is really going to be working with much bigger data sets. So the skills that they need really, and what we are saying to the market is, you have the critical reasoning skills, you have good thinking skills, you need the tools, the hard skills, the technical skills. And so the right tools are tools like Excel and Power BI and Tableau and Python and R and SQL. And so we index our training programs and our certification paths, our learning paths towards the harder skills, real skills that you're going to use on the job that can help you do more with your natural or already refined analytical skills.
Jim, that sounds excellent. Obviously, at Logical Operations, we believe people learn best from people, and hard skills are what the industries need right now. All the evidence shows that. Yep. So that sounds like a great program. I've got a question here that came in that I think is really interesting. So I want to end on this. What are the challenges that are facing the data science profession right now? And what kind of challenges do you think we're going to be grappling with over the next 5 or 10 years?
So that's a really good question. When I think about that question, I think about it in the context of any scientist. It's the same challenge of anybody who's in the natural science, in a natural science position. Because we can, should we, right? So as I think about this, the right way to put it in context is, let's take it in terms of a healthcare situation. So if a patient might benefit from us knowing that a certain disease state might best be treated with a different cocktail of therapies, would that be a good use of predictive or prescriptive analytics? Probably so. Right?
Sure.
I think we can all agree to that, right? But if we take the same data that we used to now inform their company that they're on this aggressive therapy, and that because we're trying to do something good, you should be on the alert that if this type of reaction occurs, you should have a course of treatment for them while they're on the job. Is that a good use of data?
That's an interesting point, because you can see arguments for both sides.
Absolutely. So you would say, oh, that's great. They know that Jim is in this, say it's me, has this certain condition, so we're prepared to address it if something happens at work. Then what happens if that same data, which was intended to provide that type of a situation, that type of course of action, what happens if that company uses it to say, ooh, Jim's high risk, we're going to find a way to remove him from the company? Is that a good use of data?
No, but you can see how that's a slippery slope.
Very slippery slope. So it's the same challenges, and thankfully there's laws that prevent that type of work or that type of action being taken, but it is a slippery slope, because you're going to work your way from the, well, that's really good use of data, into a gray area, and then potentially crossing the line. So I think the biggest challenge for data scientists and data analysts as we go through the next decade for sure, and certainly through, well, the remainder of the time that I'm going to spend in this space, is the ethical use of data. Because we can, should we? And that's going to be one of the toughest questions that data scientists need to grapple with and answer for themselves.
Well, Jim, that's a great breakdown of that, and I think that data ethics is obviously a huge talking point in the space, and something that we all need to start getting our heads around as computers start making more and more decisions for us.
Absolutely.
Well, Jim, I really want to thank you again for your time, and we appreciate it here at 5 Good Questions. You answered all the questions very thoroughly, and we really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, John.
Of course. I'm Jedi Jon, and we'll see you again on the next installment of 5 Good Questions.